Hello, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of Minecraft Disney World. Today, we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite rides. It's in Disney's Hollywood Studios, and it is, of course, the Great Movie Ride. It is indeed a great movie ride. It opened in May 1st, 1989, which is actually opening day of the theme park. Back then, it was called MGM Studios, and that's because Disney had a deal with MGM, and which is why most of the movies featured in this ride are either made by MGM or were owned by MGM/United Artists at the time. Now, what's interesting to note is that while this is the iconic sort of headlining ride of MGM Studios back in the day, it has so much more importance than that because it is actually the ride that caused there to be an MGM Studios and a Hollywood Studios. You see, back then, there was going to be a Hollywood Pavilion at Epcot that Michael Eisner and Marty Sklar were working on, and it was going to be this ride, essentially. But then they took a look at the ride, and they realized that there was so much more potential than that. In fact, there was enough potential to make an entire theme park out of the movies, and that was sort of the birth of MGM Studios. They made this half-day park, and this was the centerpiece. The outside of the building was modeled after Grauman's Chinese Theater, although they called it just the Chinese Theater because they didn't have the rights to Grauman. And what it is that it's a slow-moving ride. You sit in these long, big cars with a bunch of other people, and you go through these famous scenes of the movies, like Singing in the Rain, like we're seeing right here. And it's just a ride through some of our most iconic movies that you've ever seen. This was actually going to be the sister ride to another great movie ride. Not a lot of people know this, but back in the day, there were deals to make an entire section of the park based on the Muppets. And it was going to be called Muppet Movie Land. And there was going to be a ride there called the Great Muppet Movie Ride. And it was going to be very similar to this ride, except rather than people in all these famous movie scenes, it would have been Muppets in these famous movie scenes. Unfortunately, Jim Henson passed away and the deal sort of fell through. Now, a fun fact coming up is that in this scene, if you've never been on the ride, it's sort of like a Western, and you get caught in the middle of a shootout between a bunch of bank robbers and sheriffs. The animatronic for one of the sheriffs shooting at the bank robbers is actually an old Thomas Jefferson animatronic from the Hall of Presidents. We're coming up here, folks, on the Alien scene. Now, what's interesting about the Alien scene, it's the only movie that isn't owned by Disney or MGM or United Artists or Lucasfilm. Everything else is one of those categories. The reason that that's the case is because Disney actually licensed for an Alien because they were going to make an Alien ride in the Magic Kingdom. But that ended up turning into an original ride called the Extraterrestrial Experience, which later turned into Stitch's Great Escape. But they had the license and they wanted to use it, so they ended up using it in the Great Movie Ride. Now what we've got here is we've got the scene from Indiana Jones, and it's actually one of the rooms where you can find a hidden Mickey. You can find Donald Duck and I believe Mickey Mouse in one of the hieroglyphics on the wall. Now, one thing that this ride that you're not seeing here that was supposed to be in it originally was the Wizard of Oz. Now, the Wizard of Oz, I should clarify, is in here. But it's not in here as much as it was originally planned. And I'm going to take a quick second to point out. So this is the front half of the plane that they cut in half for the Casablanca scene. The back end of the plane is in the Jungle Cruise. But going back to the original story, because the Wizard of Oz was a special case, they had to pay per minute to use the Wizard of Oz. And the rumor is that the Wizard of Oz running cost was about $1 million a minute, which is a lot of money. So they ended up cutting down a lot of the Wizard of Oz. And they sort of focused on this being the main part of it. Now, one of my favorite parts coming up in the next scene is actually the finale. And what it is it's this fantastic montage that just sort of is a tribute to cinema. And it's just a couple of minutes long. And granted, it is a lot of Disney films, a lot of MGM films. It sort of limits the scope. But it's just a great just tribute to cinema as a whole. And I'm going to annotate to it because you can't record it in Minecraft, obviously. But it's definitely worth a watch. And that's pretty much the Great Movie Ride. It's a fantastic ride. It's sort of old, so it's not a thrill ride. It's unfortunately no longer the iconic center point of Hollywood studios that's more Tower of Terror these days. But I think anybody who's there, whether you're in the server or you're in the actual Hollywood studios, you should check it out because it's a great way to immerse yourself in some amazing films. And it really, it just encapsulates the spirit of the theme park. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you all have a fantastic week, and I hope to see you all next week for the next episode of Minecraft Disney.